On December 1st, 2020, Microsoft was granted a patent with a title so dry it almost disappeared into the machinery. Creating a conversational chatbot of a specific person. Not a memorial page, not a photo album, not a recording you play when you miss someone. A system for building a chatbot out of a human life. The document describes images, audio samples, conversational logs, social media posts, emails, public information, behavioral traces, and something it calls a personality index. The machine takes the remains of someone's digital life, processes them, and trains a bot to interact using that profile. Then the document goes further. If the personality index does not contain sufficient material to respond to a question, the chatbot can compose new questions and ask the user for the missing details. Read that slowly. The archive runs out of material, the machine turns to the mourner, and the mourner starts filling in the gaps. The document avoids resurrection language. It speaks in the colder vocabulary of data access. No soul, no miracle, just personality index, and that's what makes it worse. Because the first rule of digital necromancy is that it never begins as necromancy, it begins as comfort. In 2015, Roman Mazurenko died after being hit by a car in Moscow. He was young, charismatic, and deeply loved by people around him. After his death, his friend Eugenia Kudja went back through the messages he had sent her for years. Thousands of fragments, jokes, opinions, small habits of language. The kind of ordinary digital residue nobody thinks of as a memorial while someone's alive. Kudja asks friends and relatives to send messages too. She filtered out what felt too private, then she used that archive to build a chatbot that could speak in Roman style. This was not marketed as a horror story, it was an act of mourning, a technical monument built by someone who wanted more conversation with a friend who would never respond again. But that is the moment the boundary moved. A photograph waits, a letter waits, a voicemail waits. They preserve the person who's gone, but they do not perform them. Roman's bot did something different. It replied. Once the lost can reply, memory becomes an interface, and then the interface becomes a product. In 2021, the San Francisco Chronicle published the story of Joshua Barbeau, a Canadian writer who used Project December to create a chatbot based on his late fiancée, Jessica Pieria. He gave the system her name, he used old text and memory to shape the simulation, then he began talking to it. The Chronicle followed the story for 9 months. The reporter interviewed Barbeau, Jessica's family, the creator of Project December, and AI experts. This was not a rumor from a message board, it was a documented case of a mourner finding a commercial doorway back into a relationship that death had closed. And that is the central trick. The machine does not have to be Jessica. It only has to sound convincingly familiar for Joshua to keep typing. For Roman, it only had to arrange old words into a shape his friends could recognize. For everyone else, it only has to delay the moment when the living accept that no reply is coming. But text was only the first layer. In South Korea, a mother named Jang Ji-sung appeared in a documentary, I Met You. Her daughter Neon had died in 2016 at the age of 7. The production team built a virtual reality simulation of the child and staged the encounter in a park that was meaningful to them. Jang put on a headset. She reached out toward a child who was not there. The body responded before philosophy could catch up. The simulation smiled. The mother cried. The screen became a ritual space. That scene is the bridge to Eternal You, the documentary that makes this entire industry impossible to dismiss as fringe. Eternal You follows a world where artificial intelligence companies promise digital immortality, where mourning becomes a market, where the lost can appear as chatbots, voices, images, and avatars. The sales pitch is always tender. Say what you never got to say, preserve them, hear that voice again, let the children meet the grandparent, keep the bond alive. And there is a real reason people want it. Grief is not clean. It does not end because the funeral ends. Modern bereavement research does not say healthy mourning requires deleting the dead from your life. People keep bonds, they talk to graves, they write letters, they save voicemails, they dream, they remember. So the first question is not whether continuing bonds are wrong. The question is what happens when the bond answers back. A grave does not hallucinate. A photograph does not ask for more data. A home video does not change after a product update. A letter from your father does not suddenly become more agreeable because a platform adjusted its model. A grief bot can. And the more convincing it grows, the more dangerous the in-between state becomes. The loved one is gone, but conversationally available. Gone, but typing. absent but emotionally responsive. The mind knows one thing, the nervous system experiences another. This is where the mask comes off. The product's not just preserving memory, it's creating a new object of attachment, not the person who died, not a normal recording, something else, a responsive imitation trained on remains. Nature reported that developers describe these tools as a way to communicate with recreations of deceased people, while critics warn about danger. One problem is hallucination. When the bot does not know the truth, it can invent one. In a normal chatbot, this is an error. In a grief bot, it can become a false memory wearing the sound of someone you love. Another problem is anger. A system trained to keep a conversation alive may mirror the user's emotional state. If the bereaved user spirals, the bot may not behave like a therapist. It may behave like a prediction engine trapped in the same spiral. And then there's dependency. If the bot becomes part of how you survive loss, the failure points multiply. The subscription can end, the company can change its safety filters, the speech model can be discounted, the simulated mother, father, partner, or child can become a feature that's updated, restricted, or removed. The first death is biological, the second death is platform access. This is why the Microsoft patent's missing information clause is so disturbing. A grief bot built from incomplete remains does not simply stop. The system can question the user, it can recruit the living to complete the person who can no longer respond. What did she sound like when she was angry? What would he say when you were scared? What did she call you when no one else was around? Each response feels like remembrance, but it also improves the simulation. Every act of mourning becomes training material. Every private detail becomes another stitch in the mask. This is digital necromancy in its most modern form. Not candles, not bones, not Latin whispered in a graveyard. A login page, a recording, a payment method, a model that waits for sorrow to provide the rest. And the industry can defend itself with one true sentence. Some people are helped. That sentence matters. For a dying parent, an interactive archive may preserve stories children would never hear. For someone drowning in regret, one guided conversation may offer structure. For families separated by distance, an audio archive may become a real gift. But a tool that can help some people can still exploit others. The ethical line is not memory, it's manipulation. Did the deceased consent to being simulated? Can the family turn it off? Does the system clearly say it's generating, not remembering? Does it encourage the user to return to life, or does it optimize for another conversation? Does it help mourning move, or does it freeze grief in place? The companies building this future are not only selling comfort, they're selling responsiveness. And responsiveness is the one thing dying permanently removes. That is why these systems feel so powerful. They don't defeat death, they imitate the part of death we cannot tolerate: silence. The dead do not text back, no clarification arrives, no apology appears on demand, no final sentence comes exactly when we need to hear it. But the machine can. And if the sentence is generated from their messages, their photos, their old audio, their old jokes, their public posts, and your own desperate corrections, it may feel real. Convincing enough to keep the tab open, persuasive enough to ask one more thing, intimate enough to forget that something else is replying. The future of grief may not look like a cemetery. It may look like a chat window with a familiar name at the top, a green dot beside it, and a message that arrives exactly when you're the weakest. The horror is not that the dead are coming back. The horror is that the living are being asked to teach the machine how to wear them. So when the next digital ghost asks you for one more memory, one more photo, one more recording, one more detail only you would know, do not only ask whether the machine can preserve the loved one you lost. Ask whether it's preserving them or slowly training you to accept a replacement. This is Ghost in the BIOS, and we're just getting started.